My mill removed my seat because I'm just a party planner, when she knew what can a planner do. At my mother-in-law's extravagant birthday dinner in Paris, my seat was mysteriously missing. My husband Louis smiled thinly and said, "Oh dear, seems they've miscounted." As his family exchanged knowing glances, I simply nodded, excused myself, and walked out. 30 minutes later, their phones exploded with notifications: venue cancelled, catering gone, private musicians vanished. Through the window, I watched chaos erupt as Margot Walton's perfect celebration disintegrated before her horrified guests. Their faces turned from smug to ghostly white in seconds. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making a scene, it's becoming the invisible hand that brings down the curtain. My name is Haley Williams Walton, 35, founder of Wildflower Events, one of Boston's most successful boutique event planning companies. 5 years ago, I was just Haley Williams, a hardworking entrepreneur with big dreams and a maxed-out credit card. Now my company orchestrates everything from celebrity weddings to corporate retreats for Fortune 500 companies. My client list is impressive, my business is thriving, and by any reasonable standard, I'm successful. But you wouldn't know that if you asked the Waltons. The first time I met Margot Walton at the Museum of Fine Arts charity gala, she'd looked me up and down and asked with practiced disinterest, "And what exactly do you do, dear?" When I explained my event planning business, she'd smiled the way people smile at children with ambitious fantasies. "How lovely to have a little hobby that pays the bills," she'd said, before turning to introduce Louis to the daughter of a banking executive. Louis had apologized later. "Mother's just old-fashioned about careers. She'll warm up once she knows you better." She didn't. 3 years into our marriage, Margot still introduced me as Louis's wife who plans parties, as if coordinating multi-million-dollar corporate events was the equivalent of choosing paper plates for a backyard barbecue. She'd never visited my office, never acknowledged my features in Business Insider or Boston Magazine, never recognized that I employed 27 people and had an annual revenue that exceeded what her husband gave her for personal spending. "Just ignore her," Louis would say whenever I brought it up. "You know how she is." I did know. Margot Walton was Boston aristocracy, the kind that traced their lineage to the Mayflower and measured worth in generations rather than accomplishments. The Waltons owned shipping companies, real estate developments, and had buildings named after them at 3 different universities. In Margot's world, new money was barely money at all, and a self-made woman was an oddity to be tolerated, not respected. Still, when Margot's 70th birthday approached, I saw an opportunity. What better way to earn her respect than to plan the most exquisite celebration imaginable? I would showcase my talents on her behalf, prove my worth through impeccable execution and attention to detail. Louis agreed it was a brilliant idea. "Mother loves Paris in spring," he said. "We could take over that little restaurant she adores on Ile Saint-Louis. Not just any restaurant, but Le Ciel de Paris, where reservations were typically booked 6 months in advance. But connections were the currency I traded in, and within days, I'd not only secured the entire restaurant, but also arranged for Margot's favorite pianist to perform, convinced a 3-star Michelin chef to create a custom menu featuring her preferred dishes, and organized a sunset champagne cruise on the Seine following dinner. For 3 months, I worked tirelessly on every detail. The custom invitations were handcrafted by an artisan calligrapher. The flowers would be flown in from the Netherlands the morning of the event. The place settings would include antique silver from the same maker as Margot's home collection. When Louis questioned the mounting expenses, I reminded him that this was an investment in family harmony. "Your mother will finally see what I bring to the table," I said confidently. "This will change everything." The Waltons arrived in Paris 2 days before the event. Louis's parents, his 2 sisters with their investment banker husbands, his brother Charles and his 3rd wife, and various cousins who lived off trust funds and family connections. We gathered at the family's pied-à-terre near the Arc de Triomphe, a 4,000-square-foot apartment used perhaps 3 weeks out of the year. Margot greeted me with the obligatory air kisses. "Haley, you look comfortable." Such a sensible choice to dress for the flight rather than arrival. I smoothed my designer travel outfit that had cost more than what many people made in a month. Thank you. Margot, how was your flight? Tolerable, though I don't understand why Louis insisted we fly commercial instead of taking the family jet. Something about carbon footprints, she waved dismissively, as if environmental concerns were a passing fad. The first-class cabin on Air France is hardly suffering, said Catherine, Louis's oldest sister, with a smirk. Though I suppose it's quite a step up for some. I smiled politely, accustomed to their barbed comments. They never crossed the line into outright rudeness that would be gauche, but they had perfected the art of the elegant put-down. Louis squeezed my hand beneath the table. Our silent code for ignore them. He tried to play peacemaker between the world he was born into and the one he married into, rarely succeeding at either. The next day passed in a flurry of final preparations. I personally inspected the restaurant, approved the floral arrangements, confirmed the musicians, and managed countless details while the Walton family enjoyed a private tour of the Louvre followed by lunch at Maxim's. You really don't need to work during the trip, Louis had said that morning as I checked emails from my team. The hotel concierge could handle anything that comes up. This is Wildflower's reputation on the line, I'd reminded him. Everything has to be perfect. And it was perfect, down to the last champagne flute and candle. By the evening before the birthday dinner, I finally allowed myself to relax. Margot would be impressed. She would have to acknowledge my skill, my attention to detail, my contribution to making her special day unforgettable. That night, Louis was unusually quiet as we prepared for bed in our hotel room. Everything okay? I asked, applying my nighttime skincare routine. Fine, he said, not meeting my eyes. Just tired from all the running around. Tomorrow will be worth it, I assured him, excitement bubbling through me. Your mother is going to be blown away. He nodded, still averting his gaze. I'm sure she will be. The day of Margot's birthday dawned bright and clear. The kind of perfect Parisian spring day that features in films. I spent the morning confirming final details while Louis took his mother shopping at her favorite boutiques. The plan was for everyone to meet at Le Ciel de Paris at 7:00 p.m. I arrived early. Of course, to oversee the final setup. The space was transformed soft lighting, exquisite floral arrangements in Margot's favorite colors, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. The terrace offered a breathtaking view of the Eiffel Tower, which would light up with its signature sparkle during dessert. Perfectly timed to the moment when the staff would bring out the custom-designed birthday cake. Everything was flawless. The Walton family arrived in a convoy of luxury cars at precisely 7:00 p.m. Margot swept in wearing a new Chanel suit, clearly the fruits of her shopping expedition with Louis. Behind her came the rest of the family, all dressed as if attending a state dinner rather than a family celebration. I greeted them at the entrance, pride swelling as I watched their expressions. Even the Waltons couldn't deny the elegance of the setting. This is adequate, Margot said, her highest form of praise. The flowers are nice, offered Elizabeth, Louis's younger sister. Though peonies are a bit obvious for spring, I maintained my professional smile. The maitre d' will show everyone to their seats. I've arranged the placement to facilitate conversation. I'd spent hours on the seating chart, carefully considering personalities and relationships to ensure harmonious dinner conversation. As the family moved toward the main dining area, I paused to give final instructions to the chef about Margot's dairy sensitivity. By the time I turned to join the group, they were already settling into their seats around the large circular table. I approached, noting with confusion that there seemed to be no space for me. 12 seats, 12 place settings, but the table was already full. Every member of the Walton family was seated, including 2 cousins I'd barely met before. Is there a problem? Margot asked, raising a perfectly penciled eyebrow. I looked around, certain there must be a mistake. My place setting seems to be missing. Louis looked uncomfortable but didn't meet my eyes. Haley, there must have been a miscommunication with the restaurant. I'm sure they can add another chair. But the arrangement of the table, the perfect spacing of the settings, the carefully printed place cards, none of this was a mistake. I had overseen every detail personally. Actually, Charles said, glancing at his mother, we thought you'd be too busy managing the event to sit and enjoy dinner. Professional courtesy, right? You are the event planner. After all, professional courtesy, I repeated slowly, understanding dawning like ice water down my spine. Besides, Catherine added with a thin smile, this is really a family celebration. You understand. I looked to Louis, waiting for him to defend me, to insist I be included. He shifted in his seat, taking a sudden interest in the napkin on his lap. I'm sure the staff can set another place, or maybe you could join us for dessert after you've checked that everything's running smoothly. In that moment, everything crystallized. This was not a miscommunication, this was intentional. The family had collectively decided to remind me of my place, or rather, my lack of one in their circle. And Louis, my husband of 3 years, had chosen his family's protocol over his wife. I felt dozens of eyes on me, the Waltons, the restaurant staff, the musicians who had paused playing to observe the uncomfortable scene. I could make a scene. I could demand my rightful place at the table. I could embarrass them all with the truth of their deliberate cruelty. Instead, I smiled, not my professional smile, but a genuine one as a strange calm settled over me. Of course, you're absolutely right. I should make sure everything runs according to plan. I stepped back from the table. Please excuse me for a moment. I walked away with measured steps, heading not toward the kitchen as they likely assumed, but to a quiet corner near the bar where I pulled out my phone. As the event planner, I had set up everything through my company, using my company credit card with the Waltons' deposit as partial payment. Every vendor, every service provider, every detail of this carefully orchestrated evening was connected to me through digital threads I could sever with a few taps of my finger. First, I contacted my assistant back in Boston. Emma, execute contingency protocol Delta on the Walton event, immediate effect. Delta, she confirmed, sounding concerned. That's full cancellation. Are you sure? Completely, I said, watching the Waltons laughing at their table, champagne already being poured. And Emma processed full refunds to all vendors for their inconvenience, billed to Wildflower. This wasn't about money, this was about dignity. Next. I texted the maitre d', who had been briefed on various contingency plans as part of my standard operating procedure. Pierre, scenario Delta is in effect, 15 minutes. He sent back a simple thumbs up. Pierre was a professional and understood the sometimes complicated dynamics of family events. We had worked together before. He trusted my judgment. Finally, I sent a group text to all service providers connected with the evening's later activities, the Seine cruise, the birthday cake delivery, the surprise fireworks display I'd arranged, canceling everything and releasing them from their obligations with full payment. Then I ordered a glass of champagne from the bar, took a seat at a discreet table with a view of the Walton celebration, and waited. It took exactly 12 minutes for the first signs of disruption to appear. A server approached Margot with what should have been her favorite vintage champagne, but instead whispered something in her ear. Her expression shifted from smugness to confusion. 2 minutes later, the music stopped. The quartet packed their instruments with apologetic nods to the maitre d'. At the 14-minute mark, Pierre himself approached the table, tablet in hand, speaking in hushed tones to Louis's father. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need to. Pierre would be explaining that there had been an unfortunate development. Their method of payment had been declined. The pre-arranged services had been cancelled. And regrettably, the restaurant needed the space for another reservation that had confirmed payment. Louis was the first to check his phone, likely seeing the cascade of notifications about cancelled services. His head snapped up, eyes scanning the restaurant until they found me at my small table by the bar. His expression morphed from confusion to realization to horror in the span of seconds. Phones began to chime throughout the table as my cancellation notices reached each family member who had been involved in arrangements. Margot's face, so carefully maintained through decades of Botox, actually managed to register shock as she fumbled for her reading glasses to see the message on her screen. I raised my champagne glass in a silent toast, took a last sip, and stood. It was time for my exit. As I walked past their table, Louis half rose from his seat. Haley, what have you done? I paused, making sure my voice would carry just enough for the entire table to hear. It seems there's been a miscommunication. Since I'm just the event planner and not family, I've recused myself from the celebration. All deposits have been returned to my company account, and all arrangements have been cancelled. Professional courtesy. Right. Elizabeth gasped. Charles muttered something that sounded like an expensive curse word. Catherine's husband suddenly became very interested in his water glass. You can't do this, Margot hissed, her composure finally cracking. Do you have any idea how this looks? About as humiliating as not having a seat at your own mother-in-law's birthday dinner, I imagine. I smiled pleasantly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other professional obligations to attend to. Haley, please, Louis said, actual panic in his voice now. This is my mother's birthday. We can fix this. I'll speak to the maitre d'. The maitre d' can't help you, Louis. Neither can the hotel concierge, or your family connections, or your black Amex. I kept my voice even, calm. Everything was arranged through Wildflower Events. I coordinated every detail personally, using my professional reputation and relationships. And now those arrangements no longer exist. This is absurd, Margot sputtered. Completely unprofessional. Oh, I disagree, I said. I think it's entirely professional to withdraw services when the client relationship becomes untenable. You hired an event planner, not a doormat. Enjoy the view of the Eiffel Tower while you can. I believe you have about 10 minutes before the next reservation arrives. With that, I turned and walked out of Le Ciel de Paris, ignoring the commotion erupting behind me. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off the sight of the Waltons in disarray, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For 3 years, I'd tried to earn a place at their table, literally and figuratively. Tonight, I'd finally realized I didn't want it. Outside, Paris glittered in the evening light. I hailed a taxi and directed the driver to a small bistro in Le Marais I'd discovered on a previous business trip. A place with excellent wine, unpretentious food, and not a single Walton in sight. My phone began to buzz incessantly with texts and calls from Louis and various Walton family members. I silenced it and dropped it into my purse. Tonight was for me. The small bistro welcomed me with warm lighting and the smell of garlic and herbs. I took a table by the window, ordered a glass of wine and whatever the chef recommended, and finally allowed myself to process what had just happened. I had walked away from the Waltons, not just from their birthday dinner, but from their world of subtle cruelty disguised as sophistication, of wealth used as a weapon, of family loyalty that only extended to those who played by their rules, and in doing so, I had likely walked away from my marriage as well. The realization should have devastated me. Instead, I felt a strange lightness, as if I'd set down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying for years. My food arrived a simple but perfectly prepared coq au vin, along with a second glass of wine I hadn't ordered. From the gentleman at the bar, the server explained in accented English. He says it appears you could use it. I glanced over to see a man about my age raising his own glass in a toast. He wasn't conventionally handsome like Louis with his Ivy League polish, but his smile reached his eyes in a way my husband's rarely did. I nodded my thanks and returned to my meal, not interested in company just yet. My phone continued to vibrate in my purse. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it out to find 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from Louis, growing increasingly frantic. Haley, this isn't funny. Mother is furious, please come back. The restaurant is asking us to leave. Where are you? We're standing outside with nowhere to go. At least tell me how to fix this. I scrolled through similar messages from various Waltons, ranging from outrage to threatening to surprisingly contrite. The final text from Louis caught my attention. I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. Please call me so we can talk. Too little, too late. I flagged the server for my check, only to discover the man at the bar had paid for my meal as well. When I approached to thank him, he shook his head. No strings attached, he said in perfect English with a slight German accent. You look like you were having one hell of an evening, and not in a good way. Consider it my small contribution to turning it around. Thank you, I said. genuinely touched by the simple kindness from a stranger after an evening of calculated cruelty from family. Sebastian, he introduced himself, extending a hand. Haley, I replied, shaking it. Well, Haley, I hope whatever battle you're fighting tonight, you win decisively. I smiled, thinking of the Waltons standing on the sidewalk outside Le Ciel de Paris, their perfect evening in shambles. I think I already have. I returned to my hotel, not the luxury establishment where the Waltons were staying, but a charming boutique hotel I'd chosen for its proximity to my vendors. I informed the front desk that under no circumstances was I accepting visitors or calls to my room, then took a long, hot bath with the Do Not Disturb sign firmly in place on my door. In the morning, I woke to sunshine streaming through the windows and the distant sounds of Paris coming to life. For a moment, I lay there, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Then I checked my phone, 57 missed calls, dozens of voicemails, and a message from Emma at Wildflower that made me sit up straight. Boss, you should know the Waltons have been calling the office non-stop. Louis's father threatened to sue us for breach of contract. I reminded him that all services were provided through your personal company credit card as a family courtesy, not a formal business arrangement. Also, Catherine's husband apparently tried to have you blacklisted with the International Event Planning Association. But I had a nice chat with their director, remember? We planned her daughter's wedding last year and cleared that up. Just giving you a heads up, whatever happened over there, it's created quite the storm. Call me when you can. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. The Waltons were powerful, vindictive, and used to getting their way. They could potentially damage my business if they were determined enough. For a moment, doubt crept in had my moment of self-respect cost too much. Then my phone rang again. Louis, I answered, my voice calm. Yes. Haley, thank God. Where are you? I've been looking everywhere. I'm at my hotel. I believe I made it clear I didn't want to be disturbed. Please, his voice cracked slightly. Can we talk face to face? I know I messed up. I should have stood up for you. Yes, you should have. I agreed. But you didn't. Not last night. Not in 3 years of marriage. That's not fair, isn't it? When has any member of your family treated me with genuine respect? When have you ever truly taken my side against them? Silence on the line. That's what I thought, I continued. Last night made everything very clear. Louis, I've spent 3 years trying to earn a place in your family. I used my professional skills, my connections, my creativity, all to impress people who had already decided I would never be good enough. And you let them. Mother is old-fashioned. Mother is a snob, I corrected. And you're a coward who won't stand up to her, even for your wife. More silence, then a defeated sigh. What do you want me to do? Nothing, there's nothing to do, it's over. Are you leaving me over a dinner? I laughed, the sound surprising even me. No, Louis. I'm leaving you because at that dinner, when your family decided I wasn't worthy of a seat at the table, you sat down with them anyway. 2 days later, I was back in Boston, meeting with my attorney. The Waltons had indeed attempted to cause problems for Wildflower events, but their efforts had backfired spectacularly. Boston's social elite was a small world, and word had spread about how Margot Walton's birthday dinner had imploded when they'd excluded the event planner who happened to be their daughter-in-law from the family table. What the Waltons had intended as a power move had instead become a cautionary tale about treating service providers with respect. My business actually saw an uptick in bookings, with several clients specifically mentioning they appreciated working with someone who valued dignity and professionalism. Louis attempted reconciliation several times, even showing up at my office with flowers and promises to set boundaries with my family. But the damage was done. I'd seen too clearly where his loyalties lay when tested. Our divorce was finalized 6 months later. The prenuptial agreement the Waltons had insisted upon, designed to protect their assets from gold diggers like me, actually worked in my favor. It ensured a clean break with no claims on either side. Margot sent me a message after the papers were signed. I hope you're satisfied with the spectacle you've made of our family name. I responded simply, I'm satisfied with remembering my own worth. Margot, I suggest you try it sometime. A year after that fateful dinner in Paris, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. Margot Walton requested the services of Wildflower Events for her annual charity gala. Apparently, her usual event planner had become unavailable or perhaps unwilling to work with her after hearing the Paris story, and none of the other top-tier planners in Boston were responding to her inquiries. I sent a polite but firm refusal. While I appreciate your consideration, I must decline. Wildflower Events maintains a strict policy against working with clients who don't respect our team's professional boundaries. I wish you success in finding an alternative arrangement. The email I received 2 days later was as close to an apology as Margot Walton would ever come. Your refusal has placed me in a difficult position. Perhaps we could discuss terms that would satisfy your professional boundaries. I didn't respond. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. That evening, I met Sebastian for dinner at a new restaurant in Back Bay after our chance encounter in Paris. We'd stayed in touch. He'd turned out to be a literature professor on sabbatical, with a refreshing lack of pretension and genuine interest in my work. Our friendship had evolved slowly into something more undefined, yet comfortable, without the social calculations that had characterized my relationship with Louis. You seem distracted, he noted as I stared at my wine glass. Just thinking about Worth, I said, then told him about Margot's invitation. Sebastian laughed. The ultimate vindication. She needs you more than you ever needed her approval. It's not about vindication anymore, I realized aloud. A year ago, I might have taken the job just to prove I could, to show them my value. Now, I don't need to prove anything to someone who couldn't see my worth from the beginning. He reached across the table to take my hand. That's why you're thriving, and they're scrambling. You know exactly who you are. They only know who they think they should be. Later that night, standing on my balcony overlooking the Boston skyline, I thought about seats at tables. The Waltons had denied me one, thinking it would diminish me, never realizing they were actually freeing me from a table where I'd never truly belonged. Now I was building my own, surrounded by people who respected me, doing work that fulfilled me, living authentically without apology. Sometimes not having a seat at the table is the universe telling you that you deserve a better table altogether. Or perhaps, to build your own.